Coming up next, a new program called We Care. You don't want to miss tonight's topic, personal problems during the pandemic.
Now it is my pleasure to have you meet the hosts of We Care, our virtual Zoom television program.
Thank you. During this most unusual year, we've all been experiencing powerful emotions that defy definition. Who here hasn't experienced anger, frustration, confusion, sadness, and a sense of loss at different times? To make matters worse, because of our self-imposed masks that we wear to avoid exposing our inner feelings, and our COVID masks we wear for safety reasons, we often feel isolated and alone. The large glasses, goggles, and shields that cover our faces certainly don't help. Smiles, frowns, and other facial expressions that often signal our moods are completely hidden. As a result, we have to work much harder to recognize the challenges that family, friends, co-workers, neighbors, and even strangers are dealing with during this pandemic. Our goal at We Care is to provide an opportunity for all of us to learn and understand what is going on behind our protective masks. In doing so, we will hopefully feel more connected to each other and more empathetic and supportive of the people around us. I'm Joan Davids, your host of We Care. For our program this month, we have created a unique kind of support group that welcomes anybody who is mourning the loss of someone or something, or simply experiencing emotions that can be debilitating if they aren't expressed.
Hi, I'm Lara Stone, your co-host. We invited people who have registered on our website to join tonight's program. 10 people have been randomly selected for our Zoom Inner Circle. A special welcome. We thank each of you for your willingness to share your stories that will surely enlighten all of us. I have given you a possible order to follow, but this is not etched in stone. You're free to interact as you like. When it's your turn, please introduce yourself and tell us what is troubling you. Stacy, whenever you're ready.
Hi, I'm Stacy. I'm here because I'm in mourning, the traditional kind, and I feel that I represent others who have lost loved ones during this pandemic. I lost my mother. I tell you, the loss is unimaginable, and yet I get the feeling that everybody has become anesthetized to loss by the numbers of deaths from COVID that we are bombarded with on a daily basis. But each and every loss is a devastation to a family, a couple, a friend. I'm here to represent myself and others who won't have another chance to see their loved one, a husband, a wife, a grandparent, a child, a friend, or a coworker. My pain has been compounded by my inability to see my mother while she suffered and succumbed to the virus. I have no feeling of closure. And now, when I could really benefit from the hugs, the nearness of life more than ever, it's impossible. I can't get that from my children who live a plane ride away, and I can't get it from my friends because of social distancing. It's a tragic time. I hope people would be as compassionate as possible to those who they know that have lost a loved one and reach out to them. It is important to remember that one day that person who needs a shoulder, virtual or not, will be you.
Stacy, I hear you. I understand your pain. I'm Sam, and I hope you and others can understand mine. I've been grieving, if that's what you want to call it, for a long time, well before the pandemic. It started when I lost my job 2 years ago. With the loss of my job, I lost my ability to support my family. When we lost our house, I lost my self-esteem, my hopes, and my dreams, and that resulted in losing my family.
Where do you live, Sam?
Right now, I've swallowed my pride and I'm living in my brother's home. It's his computer that's making my visit with you possible. But most of my days last year were spent in homeless shelters or on the streets when the shelters got too crowded. Yes, I've learned to appreciate the moods of Mother Nature more than most of you. I know how it feels to sleep out in the open when it's raining, freezing cold, hot, so hot I can fry an egg on the sidewalk for breakfast if I had one.
It must have been very dangerous to live like this. What about the other homeless people? You sound as though you were pretty sane, though I don't know why. I know there are people out there who don't seem quite normal. Aren't they dangerous?
Well, sure, there are many kinds of dangers. Certainly mentally impaired people, but guns, knives, drug dealers, they were pretty intimidating as well. What scared me the most was the virus. That's why when my brother offered to help me, I didn't say no this time. I wasn't ready to die from the virus, which I'm sure I would have if I stayed in those shelters those last few months.
So tell me, Sam, what are you doing about getting a job and getting your family back?
Well, you make it sound as though it's so easy. All I have to do is snap my fingers. I worked in retail. I had a management position that I worked years to get. The work closed. Another store where I worked closed. And each time I got another job, there was another closing. Where were the jobs? Amazon was eating away at every brick and mortar store. Where do you suggest I look for a job now that during the pandemic? Do you know how many stores are going out of business?
I'm sorry, Sam. Perhaps I sounded a bit flip. I don't mean to minimize your situation or your losses. I'm Tony. I have a tendency to think everybody has it easier. You see, I live in a wheelchair. Sometimes a chip on my shoulder surfaces. I apologize.
What happened? Were you always tied to a wheelchair?
No, I used to have a pretty great life. I was a football player in college.
So what happened?
I served my country. They say I'm lucky to be alive. I shouldn't complain. So I guess you know what I mourn. The loss of my legs, the loss of my freedom to walk, run, and to live as nimbly as the rest of you.
What is it like for you during the pandemic?
Well, let me ask any one of you who can walk on your own two legs how much fun it is to go shopping now and avoid contracting the virus. You're nervous, right? Uncomfortable. And you try to move quickly when you get too close to people who don't seem to be following the safety protocol, right? Well, just imagine what it's like to go shopping in a wheelchair and try to avoid being near anybody. Some people ignore me like I don't exist. Some people block the aisle. And some hover over me in a kind of an unhealthy way. If I didn't feel like an odd man out before, I sure do now. Everything is twice as uncomfortable and twice as isolating.
Are you able to work? Do you have a job?
Yes, in that I'm very lucky. Once I recovered from the surgery, I began therapy, which helped me restore my interest in living. I was lucky to get assistance through the VA, and it helped me find my life's work. I'm a vocational counselor now. I don't make a fortune, but I'm not homeless. Sam, perhaps I can help you find a job that will restore your life, your self-esteem, and maybe even your family.
I can't tell you how much I would appreciate that. Maybe after the program, you could give me your contact information?
Sure, I'm happy to help wherever I can. Helping you won't bring back my legs, but it sure does a lot to help me feel validated, and that I'm still useful.
Wow, this is really special. It makes my job more meaningful, too.
Seeing the two of you making a connection is heartwarming. And Lord knows my heart can use some warmth, especially around men. I'm Allison. What is my loss? Comfort around men and a sense of security. You see, I'm a victim of domestic abuse. My husband had a terrible temper. I'm one of the dreamers who live in the United States in a very tenuous way never knowing when we can be picked up and deported. My husband took advantage of my situation, knowing I would never report him.
Are you still with your husband? Or are you in a safe place?
I'm not with my husband. I can't really tell you where I am, but I'm working on this problem. And I'm hoping with every ounce of my body that dreamers will soon be given the status we deserve and have been praying for during these past years.
Just guessing, but I think the pandemic has made even more difficult for women in abusive relationships.
You are absolutely correct. I learned that 1 in 4 women are at risk of domestic violence, physical, emotional, sexual, or psychological. And this includes people of all races, cultures, genders, sexual orientations, and socioeconomic classes. Whatever problems people had in their relationship before the pandemic are increased. People who abuse others often do so because of low self-esteem and lack of avenues to relieve anger and frustration. We all have reason to be angry and frustrated due to stay-at-home orders, living in unusually close quarters, school closures, layoffs, and limited personal movement. And due to the pandemic, people are less likely to get the help they need because victims are unable to safely connect with services. I was one of the lucky ones. I was at the point I couldn't take it anymore, and a friend I made, well, she saved my life.
I'm really sorry, Allison, that you had to suffer from so much abuse. Thank goodness a friend came to your rescue. Quite frankly, it's hard for me to believe that a man with a lovely wife like you could be so cruel. I hope you know that all men are not like that.
I'm sure this is true, but it will take a long time till I can trust again.
I guess I'm lucky. Nobody would dare to hurt me. I'm Dave. My size scares people. The truth is, it scares me. What do I mourn? My younger, healthier, and better looking self. There was a time when I enjoyed getting dressed, going out, dating. Not anymore. And a mask can't hide my problem of obesity. I've been told I'm taking too much room and that if I was only more disciplined, I could control my problem. Well, it's just not that simple. My problem is a combination of genetics and a medication known to contribute to weight gain. It has nothing at all to do with lack of discipline. Most people like me don't have a character flaw. We have problems. In any case, it's nothing that should be a source of ridicule or criticism.
How has the pandemic affected you, Dave?
The pandemic has been difficult. Working at home on Zoom day in and day out certainly hasn't been easy. However, I've actually appreciated not having to deal with hurtful comments, questions, and jokes. I'm not as exposed as I was when I had to take public transportation to work. Can you imagine? I'm actually not looking forward to returning to normal.
Well, Dave, your comments give us insight into the awful struggles you deal with in our normal world. I'm Jack. This pandemic has severely impacted young people like me in critical ways. I wish we could go back to what was once considered normal. Naturally, we're also very worried about getting the virus and the complications that could follow. But we mourn the loss of opportunities to be with friends in the same room, the ability to create new friendships, deal with breakups, share intimacies, even moments of sexual discovery. We need to feel the warmth of human contact. One time I got so upset with this Zooming, FaceTime business that I almost threw my computer across the room. That was really bad night when my girlfriend was too depressed to talk to me. I didn't know what to do. A lot of young people are not dealing well with the loneliness, the anxiety, and even depression. Some of us have lived with these problems most of our lives and usually kept them under control. But this pandemic has played havoc with all of our management mechanisms.
Jack, thank you for sharing this. I'm sure it's a hard time for young people. I know you're a college student. How has college life been for you?
Well, in the fall, we were supposed to return to the campus, which I did. Of course, there were many rules and restrictions for our protection. Actually, it would have been much better if they told us to stay home. But we came back, and then when things got bad and all classes were taught on Zoom, it was tough. I'm the type of student that learns best in the classroom, where I benefit from the immediate interaction with the subject, my classmates, and my professors. It's hardly the same when you're trying to exchange incomplete ideas, solutions, and guesses on Zoom. I need to touch the things I'm working with. You see, I'm a chemistry major. Well, getting through that last chemistry course was torture. Now I'm even questioning my major. Maybe chemistry is not for me. I really enjoyed chemistry in high school when I was able to work in the lab, but chemistry on Zoom, not good. I can't imagine what it's like for younger students. They must be having a heck of a time. And professors, public school teachers, I'm so glad I'm not one of them.
My name is Roberta. I'm a teacher, Jack. I understand exactly what you're talking about. I'm more in the days when I had more confidence in myself as a teacher. When we met in person every day, I had confidence in my teaching skills. I connected to my students. My students are middle school age with a wide range of learning issues that are exacerbated by remote learning. This remote or even hybrid learning is beyond draining. I'm not sure which I handle better. Going into a classroom, knowing the virus could easily be passed on to me, and I could take it home and pass it on to my husband and children, or teaching middle school children on Zoom. I know on Zoom, I'm losing some of them, students who would excel under normal in-person learning situations. I was never trained to teach remotely. In my spare time, which is almost non-existent, I've been joining workshops to learn how to do it more effectively. I'm doing the best I can, but I know I'm falling short. My emotional and physical health have been impacted by the anxiety associated with teaching for hours in front of a screen to children who look tired, bored, distracted, and unhappy. It's interesting that now the parents are being forced to help with the teaching process. Teachers are considered essential workers. Well, I guess that's the silver lining. This pandemic has shown our society just how important we teachers are. Teachers throughout the country need more support, better training, and better salaries if they're to do the essential job of preparing our youth for the challenges ahead. It's absurd that most teachers today with a full-time job have to work 2 jobs to live a middle-class life.
Roberta, you are absolutely correct. It is absurd the way teachers have been treated. I'm Jane, and I think the salaries for what you and your colleagues are expected to do is insulting. I have tremendous respect and gratitude for you. I'm just wondering if you might have any advice for a parent of an autistic child during a pandemic.
Thank you, Jane, for your understanding. I've only had a few students on the autism spectrum, but I know firsthand how exhausting it is to give them all they need. As a teacher, It is a special challenge to effectively handle some of the personality issues that can cause misunderstandings, especially with other students. I'm sure you're doing as well as anyone could. My heart goes out to you.
Thank you. My sadness didn't start with the pandemic. I've been grieving for a long time. I love my son, Jeremy, but I am frustrated and saddened by all of the difficulties that he's dealing with, trying to connect people around him who love him and don't know what he wants or needs. Do you understand, all of you here, what it means to be on the autism spectrum? People who don't have an autistic child probably can't understand how a parent's life is affected, as well as the lives of any siblings living in the home. Even if you have never been a parent, I think you will agree that parenting in general is one of the most challenging jobs. Your child could be cooing and smiling for 30 seconds and then for no apparent reason start crying as though somebody were stabbing him. It takes a great deal of time to get to know his preferences and reactions to different kinds of light, noises, and people's voices. Potty training, walking, speaking, all are important milestones that are under best conditions take a lot of time, patience, and encouragement. Misunderstandings, bad timing, excessive pressure are par for the course, but they are relatively easy to recover from with most children. Now, picture life with a beautiful child with autism. Children who have difficulty communicating in traditional ways, even after the first few years. Misunderstandings are far from easy to address. The frustration that child and parents experience can easily trigger excessive crying, tantrums, and pain. One of the joys of interacting with your baby or toddler is hugging. But for some autistic children, hugging, even being touched and hugged, something I really want to do to convey my love for him, it's difficult. It's difficult to know what he needs and wants. The teenage years for just about everybody are stressful, often due to the tug of war over dependence and independence between parents and children. Multiply that stress by 10 for families with autistic teenagers. Every time my husband and I ask Jeremy to do something, we pray he will respond. When he's frustrated, he sometimes screams or bangs his head, no matter where we are. Now, with the pandemic, our two other children are forced to be in an unsettled environment day and night. This has been going on for months, but it seems like years. Throughout this time, I can't help feeling that while doing my best to help Jeremy, I'm shortchanging his siblings, who also have needs that have multiplied because of the pandemic. Sometimes I'm consumed with guilt for not giving Morgan and Charlie the attention that they more than deserve. It is tiring and draining time, emotionally and physically.
Sure, you're right, and I'm sorry. So, wouldn't it be better for parents with autistic children to send them to a special school, a place where they can stay and be handled by experts? It must be too difficult for parents to take care of their autistic children by themselves, especially when they get older and stronger.
Perhaps there are people who do this, but if there is any way parents can keep their child home with a family and give him the love that strangers can't possibly, we will do it. Sending a child away is like chopping off a limb. Could you do that to yourself?
No, Jane, I know I could not. I'm Betty. My heart goes out to all of you dear people who are speaking tonight. I'm grateful to hear your stories and all that you mourn. It doesn't lighten my own burden, but it reminds me of our common humanity and how we all need to be sensitive to everyone we encounter. We simply don't know what struggles other people face. We now wear double masks, one to shield us from the outside world, and a pandemic mask to protect us and others from the virus. Both masks serve a purpose, but at the same time, they add to our isolation. As an older woman in the winter of life, I have the greatest compassion for all you young people who are missing out on so much, missing out on things you need for development, be it social, emotional, or academic. I know about the loss of milestones, shared markers in our lives. But tell me, any one of you, which milestones have you had to skip or had to change drastically the way you observe them?
Birthday celebrations, proms, graduations, parties.
Bar mitzvahs and christenings, weddings, showers.
Bachelor and bachelorette parties.
Vacations with family, with friends.
That's a lot of important and fun milestones. Our youth have every right to be upset. But I hope you understand that we seniors are upset too. I'm grateful We Care picked me because I can represent many of us seniors. We mourn the loss of important people who are no longer part of our lives. We mourn that we are forced to face the fragility of our remaining years. We mourn our loss of relevance. Our experience and life-earned wisdom seem to pale compared to the energy and innovation of today's young people. We feel obsolete. To make matters worse, the pandemic has laid bare the belief that losing us is no big deal. It's even worse for people dependent on caregivers or living in nursing homes. We seem easily expendable. Well, I'm not ready to die, and my children and grandchildren aren't ready to see me disappear. Who then would provide them with the best homemade chicken soup? Who would comfort them when they get into mischief? Who would give them hugs and tell them family stories about their parents who also made mistakes? We have milestones too. One that people wait for 40 years to enjoy is retirement. And now it's a sad disappointment. Where can you go when you can't travel? Who can you see when you aren't supposed to go near anybody? All of the time that we could have spent, things we delayed for when we're retired. Visit with family, fun times with old friends, trips to unexplored sites. Well, now the opportunities are just not there and the time is disappearing. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could bottle the days and nights of this pandemic and save them for another time? But we can't. We're being robbed. For senior citizens, 1 year subtracted from those we have left is one too many. Those of us lucky enough to have another year or two, well, if and when we can get back to a so-called normal life, we'll be weaker. Our physical and mental health can't possibly be as robust as they were a year earlier. Believe me, every day, week, month, and year has more value when you are a senior. We feel the loss of time to live becomes exponentially more important.
Betty, I hear you. You bring tears to my eyes. Just a moment. What you said affects me greatly. It hurts to hear what you said. As a mother of a beautiful autistic child, I know firsthand how much we value people like you. I don't know what I would do without the help of my mother and father, who are senior citizens. They provide me and my children with the patience I often lack. Please know that you are truly valued.
Thank you, Jane. I send you a virtual hug.
It seems we have one person in our group that we haven't heard from. Shailene, what is it that you mourn?
Well, I'll be honest. It's never been easy to live with stereotype constantly preceding me. As an Asian student born in the US, I'm expected to be a mathematical wizard, high achiever, diligent worker, and quiet. I'm sure there are people who are proud of these character traits that are ascribed to us. Personally, I've had mixed emotions, especially those times when I didn't feel that I was living up to my parents' expectations. But that is a minor issue compared to the ugly stereotypes that have been reinforced by the previous president of our country. We are accused of being the chief spreaders of the coronavirus, or as the previous president has enjoyed referring to, the Chinese virus. We are perceived as killers. We've been called spies and thieves and subjected to harassment, bullying, physical violence. It's becoming dangerous to go about our business in public, even with our real masks on. We are threatened and told to go home. But there is nowhere else for us to go. This is our home. And my friends who have come here from abroad to study or visit are made to feel so unwelcome. I'm deeply ashamed. You ask me what I mourn? I mourn the sense of security I used to feel in my neighborhood and everywhere I went. I never thought that I could be the target of hate. I'm so sorry to tell you that there have been more than 2,800 first-hand reports of anti-Asian hate, verbal harassment, shunning or avoidance, physical assaults, and being coughed on or spit on. My parents who came to this country before I was born are now mourning too. I wonder when we will feel comfortable enough to enjoy living here again.
I hope that day will come soon, Jayling. Lara and I thank you, each of you, for your stories. Now it's our audience's opportunity to shower you with questions, comments, or even suggestions in a polite and sensitive way, of course.
Betty, if I can call you that, I'm touched by your thoughts. It must be very upsetting to see a year of your life squandered because of the pandemic. I wonder if it isn't possible for you to go out more, visit your family and friends, even travel. They say that air travel is safer than we think. Living such a lonely life can't be healthy. Wouldn't you rather enjoy whatever years you have left than merely exist?
I understand where you're coming from, Stephen, but aren't you being a bit cavalier with Betty's life? It's dangerous out there. If Betty were my grandmother, I wouldn't want her to take such a risk.
I agree with Jack. You see, Betty, young people do value our elders, even though we don't always show it.
Thank you, Jack and Jayling. And thank you, Mr.
Stephen, I didn't mean to show you any disrespect. I'm just thinking about how I think I would behave if I were in your situation.
I understand completely. And frankly speaking, if I weren't the only living grandmother for my grandchildren, I might throw caution to the wind and spend real time with them, even get on a plane and visit places I've always wanted to. Unfortunately, I feel that now it's just too risky.
Jalen, I would like to ask you a question. Do you think those stereotypes, the good ones, are still representative of all Asian students? Or do you think it's okay for people to use them?
Well, I think there is a lot of truth in some of them. My friends are very hardworking. They do care greatly about achieving academic goals. And not all, but most of my friends are relatively quiet, soft spoken. You have to understand it's part of our culture to spend more time listening than talking, especially when our elders are speaking. It's our way of showing respect. We value group thinking instead of individual ones. We also have a special respect for math. Perhaps that is why we seem to be really good at it. We spend a lot of time developing our skills by ourselves because we aren't used to having questions answered for us. From ancient Chinese time, the annual imperial examination was open to every citizen and a way to honor one's family. Chinese believe knowledge will bring good future to their kids and honor their family. I hope this answered your question.
Yes, thank you. I understand your perspective. Sometimes stereotypes seem relatively reliable. I guess in your case that's true. But I personally have a problem with stereotyping in general. It upsets me when people learn that somebody is in a certain group and they immediately can draw up all kinds of images, not realizing that each person is a unique individual and shouldn't be judged by their religion, nationality, race, gender, or sexual orientation.
I understand what you are saying. What is your name?
Vanessa.
Has this happened to you?
Yes, it has. I don't mean to sound like I am on a soapbox lecturing everybody here. I guess it's because of my own personal experience, that I am sensitive to the issue of prejudging people without knowing who they really are. You see, when I moved with my family to Philadelphia and started attending high school, all went well at first. However, some of my new friends changed the way they treated me when they learned that my parents came from a certain country. They made assumptions about my life, our religion, our traditions, rather than try to communicate with me and find out who I am. In a short space of time, they started distancing themselves from me. At first, I didn't think it was true, but eventually I had to accept it. It really hurt. So forgive me if I'm overly sensitive to the practice of stereotyping people and the harm that it can do.
I'm sure we would all feel the same way, Vanessa. My comment is for everybody, but mainly for Allison. I'm very disturbed by your experience. Women my age have grown up with the idea that women and men should be treated with equal respect. The stereotype of the woman being subservient to a man and treated as his property that he could command and abuse is awful. One could think that with more women in high positions in the business world, academia, and government, men would not feel empowered to do whatever they want. I know you were in a especially difficult position, but still, your husband, Allison, acted as if we were back in the 1950s.
I agree, Danielle, that women have made great strides. We should all be grateful for the women's movement and the women who led it. But I'm still of the thinking that women are too often at the mercy of men. How often do we hear stories where a man was abused? Surely they exist, but we rarely hear them. Or that it was a woman who rejected a man because he got too heavy or he became disfigured.
I can tell you that it does happen to men. I can personally attest to that. But I have to agree with you. As much as I have been hurt, I do think it's easier for a man, regardless of his size or shape, And I agree. That's not right.
No, it isn't right. Not at all. Moving on to another topic. Roberta, I understand your reaction to the quick shift to remote learning. It must have been overwhelming at first for you as a teacher and you, Jack, as a student. I just wonder if with opportunities to explore the different features available and time to get used to these features, you might come to appreciate online teaching and learning. This question is directed to both of you.
Thank you for your question. Yes, I do think there are obvious advantages for people who can't travel to a classroom due to illness, weather, or distance. Online learning is a blessing. I also recently discovered there are online textbooks that have amazing features. They can make learning extremely convenient for teachers and students. An English online textbook can contain the text as well as videos and audios in addition to the usual illustrations. This is just one example I've discovered, but it's still difficult to communicate certain things in a timely and accurate manner. It's very easy to misinterpret what people say and do on Zoom. What do you think, Jack?
I agree with all you said. I see the advantages, but I personally have experienced some of the disadvantages. Perhaps I just need more time and more guidance. Sam here. I think there's another issue that wasn't mentioned. What about all the students who live in areas where internet reception is poor, if it even exists? And what about the families who don't have computers, tablets, or a quiet place to sit while in online school?
All true. A lot has to be done to make it work for everybody. It's going to be a bumpy ride, just as it has been for any innovation. People didn't quite know what to do with a telephone or even a television when they first became available. And not everybody had one. There was a lot of resistance. Today, of course, we can't live without them. I believe in time, the same thing will occur with online learning.
Even if you don't mind my asking, what kind of work do you do?
Not at all. I work for a publishing company, and we are constantly improving our online products.
Well, you are a really good spokesman for your company.
Well, thank you. I do my best. Tony, I have a question for you. First, I want to personally thank you for your service to our country. To be perfectly frank, I couldn't do what you did. Joining the military takes a lot of courage and something else, I figure. Patriotism? I think of myself as patriotic. I vote. I teach my children American values. However, it never occurred to me to join the military, especially since it was no longer compulsory. I think it takes a very special person. Would you be willing to share your motivation with us?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I can't deny it makes me feel good to know that what I did was appreciated. As I said before, I was a pretty happy guy. In fact, I considered myself a very lucky guy until 9/11. My dad was working in the World Trade Center and he was killed. I was having a hell of a rough time dealing with his loss. I was so full of anger. I kind of lost my way. I needed a sense of purpose. I needed to do something that at the time appeared I would be getting back at the people who took him from my life. So I decided to join the Army. Ironically, while I never held a gun before, I understood full well what it meant to be a team player and to want to win. In basic training, my team became a fighting unit. My guys and gals bonded and became like brothers and sisters. We had a common goal, the belief that we were helping our country to recover from a horrible loss. Once deployed, combat sharpened our skills, and winning became a daily life and death affair. Some of us, actually most of us, managed to survive, some in better shape than others.
Do you regret what you did, especially since you paid such a high price?
You know, I'd be lying if I said I didn't regret it at times. When I lost my legs, it wasn't the only thing I lost. There are days that chip on my shoulder is pretty obvious, but I would be lying if I said I regretted it all the time. When I'm feeling pretty low, I try to remind myself that I did something good, something noble for my dad and my country.
Thank you, Vanessa and Danielle, for your questions, and Tony for your honest response and your service. I believe we have time for one more question. Lisa, I see your hand up.
Before Lisa speaks, I would like to say something. I'm not sure it will be appreciated here, but I have my anger, frustrations, and plenty of grievances too. But they are different from those I heard from your guests today. I haven't heard anybody talk about the limitations of our freedom that we are all subjected to. Being forced to wear a mask, this is not the American way. Being told I can go to my gym or eat inside my favorite restaurant, I could be fined if I do. My children can't go to school. I can't go to work because I have to stay and be their teacher. Really? What do I know about teaching? I don't even understand some of what they are learning. And who decided that we can't go into the hospital when a member of our family is there? Would you believe they wouldn't let me in the hospital last week? No matter how much I begged to be with my husband after his operation, I wasn't allowed to be there and help him. He needed me badly, and there was nothing I could do if I didn't want to go to jail. I'll be honest with you. Hearing him crying on the phone, well, that was the last straw. I don't get it. I'm in a constant state of anxiety. I don't recognize my life. I don't recognize my country. Sometimes I feel that I don't belong here anymore because what is going on in America is totally unfamiliar to me.
I don't know you, but I'm sorry about your husband. I hope he's all right now. I don't completely understand your thinking. I can only tell you this. None of what we are going through is familiar. Nothing is normal. We are all feeling anxiety, clearly for different reasons. But I had a similar experience with my sister, who I know was terribly upset with when she fell and was taken to the hospital and I couldn't be with her. I felt awful, but what could I do? It didn't seem right. I complained, but it didn't help. Once I calmed down and I had a chance to think things through, I understood. It made sense for my health and my sister's health and all the patients in the hospital. I understood it's not safe to have visitors, but I still felt terrible. It's a terrible time. No one wants to wear a mask. It's so uncomfortable. I can barely breathe when I have one on. Trust me. No one wants to stay at home all the time. We feel like prisoners. We are all doing these things, even the most painful things, like not caring for our loved ones in the hospital, to help each other stop the spread of the virus. I do believe this. The only comfort I can offer is that you are not alone in feeling frustrated, angry, and upset.
Thank you, Vanessa. I couldn't have said it better. We may be on different sides of the aisle, but we share many of the same emotions, perhaps for different reasons. John and Lara, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to speak. I'm feeling it too. I've lost members of my family to the pandemic. I am not too ashamed to tell you how deeply affected I am by their loss. The virus has been hitting the Black community like a sledgehammer. Talk about homelessness. Well, African Americans make up more than 40% of the homeless population, but represent only 13% of the general population. That is quite a statistic I read. American Indians have been hit hard. I believe our country is in the eye of a cyclone. People are dying from a virus, from fires, hurricanes, guns, and a lack of decent health care. Even more criminal, people are starving. I read that 1 in 6 people are going hungry. Lack of food in a country as rich as ours. The only thing that gives me solace is that with so many people feeling lost, feeling vulnerable, they may just feel the need to unite and work together to make the changes that must be made in our country. If I didn't see it with my own eyes, I wouldn't have believed the way people who previously wouldn't understand or commit to our cause walk with us to show their support of the Black Lives Matter movement. What happened to George Floyd and to many other Black men and women have finally forced the world to look at the injustice that has been perpetuated for hundreds of years. More people than ever seem to care. This can be a pivotal moment in American history. I implore all of the people who will now be making important decisions that affect all of us, decisions about our health care, safety, economy, education, and equality. Make them bold and courageous. Make the changes that our country requires if it ever to fulfill its true potential and be the America that each and every resident can be proud to live in and every visitor proud to be.
Thank you, Lisa. Yours too is a very powerful message. I can tell you from the point of view of our program, We Care, this has been a challenging but exciting time. We are all pioneers. I'm sure Lara will agree it took months for us to get used to using Zoom. Now we see the advantages. Our participatory program can reach people throughout the country, even abroad. When we were a live show broadcasting in a studio in Philadelphia, we were really limited. We are thrilled to have such a diverse audience. Now for important information. We started tonight's We Care program acknowledging that this is a very difficult time. So we are providing resources that can address a variety of problems on our website, www.PZRT.org. Check out the sharing and learning page. Our hope is you will find something that will help diminish your sadness, your anger, frustration, grief, and most of all, isolation. Remember, at We Care, you are never alone. We want to especially thank 2 organizations, Elements of the Community and The Key Idea, for joining us tonight. We are particularly fortunate to have Lenore Lyon, creator and president of Key Idea, share meaningful postcards from her Keys to Coping project that help people cope with the pandemic. These postcards echo feelings similar to those expressed in our performance.
Thank you, Joan. My name is Lenore Lyons, and I was traveling with the Key Idea across the country on a national tour when everything shut down last March 11th. As we drove back to Massachusetts 10 hours a day for 5 days, I realized that everything that was planned across the country was closed. And I got the idea to do a hands-off project, pandemic postcards, and people from across the country sent hundreds of postcards describing their experiences and things they missed. This is just a handful, but there's more available on the website and on social media. So I'll just read some of these for you. Wearing masks whenever I go into public is getting annoying, but it's necessary. Wear your mask. Stay safe. To cope, I make masks. I miss time alone, quiet, no sibling squabbles, no conference video calls, no constant chatter. I miss large, merry family gatherings, hugs, kisses, laughing, loud dancing, joking, kids playing. I miss the freedom of life as we knew it. Movies, music events, shoppings, my job, happy hours with friends, weekend getaways, beaches, vacation, date nights, families, stitching, kayaking, touching, hugs, mani-pedis, restaurants, social events, everything, haircuts. I miss believing that everything would be okay. I have no time to die. I bought some tulip bulbs to enjoy next spring. COVID-19 canceled our cousin's gathering. We've rescheduled. My 69th high school reunion is approaching. My son and his wife are moving here in 3 years. I'm planning another trip to Japan. I'm in the middle of a good book. You see, Lord, I have no time to die. And she is in her 90s. And something I think we can all feel and relate to, I get closer to you through Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenore. These postcards are truly meaningful. And now, audience, it is your chance to use a special feature of Zoom and share your stories in our small breakout discussions that will include our performers. Stay as long as you like. Your discussion will not be recorded. We are suggesting 4 questions. What inspired you to attend this performance? Is there a particular character or issue that resonated with you? How can people address their loneliness? What are the advantages and disadvantages of remote learning and remote forms of communication?
Before we go into our groups, I just want to thank you for joining us tonight on a special day, International Women's Day. On Monday, March 15th, the recording of tonight's performance will be available on our website and social media. Hope to see you at our next performance in the spring when we perform The Stages of Life.